Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and today we continue with the Hazards of the Old Ones, Chapter 10, Come Home, and we will also be reading Chapter 11, Carahil's Walk, and then we will be done with Part 1 of the book, The Sisters Program. And then we will be proceeding to Part 2, which is called The 11th Daughter. And if you recall from previous readings, I mentioned the concept of the 11th daughter pops up quite a bit in this book. There's a whole Part 2 of the book dedicated to it, the 11th daughter. We saw that in the House of Xandar, Princess Rock was the 11th daughter. And on Xandar, that is a very unlucky thing. You can blame pretty much any misfortune you have on the 11th daughter of your household. You can treat them however you wish. It's perfectly legal on Xandar to do whatever you want to the 11th daughter. You can heap as much misery on this person as you like. And as we see, the House of Xandar treated Princess Rock, who is small and plain and nothing to look at, unlike the other Xandar children. They treated her like shit. They tried to sew her off into prostitution, and that didn't work because she wasn't really, she didn't have a lot of pulchritude, unlike her sister, Princess Marlith. And then, we don't know what to do with her, we'll sell her to a Bergen meat market, and Bergens are known cannibals in the Zaffin Armada, and we'll just sell her off to them, and someone can buy her and devour her. But then King Hezru has a mind wave, what happens if something bad befalls Princess Marlith, who has been fighting with Captain Davidge in space for 80 years, and we've been making coin off of this. What happens if Marlith goes down? We need a backup plan. We have this worthless daughter. We can teach her how to fly a starship and how to use the Baron, which is the weapon of the House of Xandar, that none of the other children, including Princess Marlith, ever took study of. The Baron, it's a very light sword that's invisible. It's invisible, you can't see it. And send her off into space to fight Captain Davidge, and money will continue to flow in. Get through these 2 chapters and we are done, and we move on to the second part, and that is where the meat of the story takes place, where all these various little plot beats that have been flowing in, like the mysterious letters, who is this person M who has been sending these letters, what's going on with the sisters, and what's going on with this planet that Carahil saw that's going to be destroyed. How does that figure into all of this? That all gets fleshed out in Part 2. There is a 12th chapter to Part 1, and I will not be reading Chapter 12. I know you're disappointed, but that's just how it has to be, because that chapter is completely extraneous. It has nothing to do with the plot. It doesn't advance anything. The situation of Part 1 has been resolved, and Part 1 of this book is basically a carryover from the first book, a unresolved plot thread from Book 1, and we call it the case of the premature sister, and we'll find out more about that during the reading today. But it gets resolved in these 2 chapters, in Chapter 10 and Chapter 11. Chapter 12 serves no purpose, and again, this is Book 2, and I still had a lot of bad habits, in writing, and every so often I'd go off on a tangent that you gotta be precise, you gotta stay on point, especially in the modern reading audience, where your audience doesn't really have that much of an attention span. You have to acknowledge that, and you just have to go with it. You gotta get on that train and write it. Chapter 12 is just nothing more than an exercise in writing, and it serves no purpose, so I'm not gonna read it. If you want to read it, let me know. I'll send you the chapter, and you can read it. But I'll summarize it at the end here. So, as we saw in the previous chapter, Sig found out that the sisters are at Castle Blanchefort to smash Captain Davidge. One of their sisters has gone into fertility, and that happens from time to time. And she specifically requested Captain Davidge be the one to give her the smashing, the servicing. The sisters use their program everywhere throughout the league. They have charts, and they say, okay, this sister is now fertile, which only doesn't happen all the time, just every so often. And we project that this person over here, this lord of this household, would be a good match for this sister. And they go and they say, we want you to participate. It's completely voluntary, but it's completely compulsory too. If you do not have a good programmability in the league, if you're a gentleman or if you're a lord, then you are done. Your name will be mud. No matter what skills or talents you have, you can expect to go nowhere, except the most menial and demeaning of jobs. However, if you have a good programmability, if the sisters come to you often for programmability, and Captain Davidge has, as he stated in the previous chapter, has participated 7 times, and that's quite a bit, and that gives him the Magni programmability, which is pretty high. And there's quite a hierarchy of programmability, starting with the Ventinome, which is untouchable. Lord Aram, his family is Ventinome. Sisters don't want anything to do with the House of Aram. And subsequently, he is in the mailroom at the fleet, and that's pretty much all he can ever hope to aspire to, at least before he met Lord Belmont. Then you have another few low-level ones. The Igni is a very low level, implying the sisters are generally dissatisfied with you and your ilk. You have the Dente, a very novice level, but it's not really indicating satisfaction or dissatisfaction from the sisters in any way. It means you've done it like either 0.5. And how do you have 0.5 of a smash session with a sister? I haven't quite worked that out, even though I created this, but, I still question myself. 0.5 to 1 times. You have the Alinde, 2 or 3 times. That implies you have growth and potential to be a very programmable gentleman. Then you have the Canistronomy, which implies great promise and budding maturity. You're getting up there. That's like the 3 to 4 times. You have the Elende. The gentleman is very satisfying to the sisters. They are satisfied. They're going to keep coming back for more satisfaction. Then you have the Profundni, which the sisters are in open awe of this gentleman. 4, 5, or 6 time participation will get you the Profundni programmability level all day long. Then you have where Captain Davidge is, the Magni, which is the sisters welcome the gentleman into their council. He and his line are beloved by them, which is we see here that the sisters are very interested in maintaining a friendship with the House of Blanchefort, despite Countess Blanchefort's protestations. And then you're getting into legendary territory. You're getting into the Pell programmability setting, which is Lord Belmont, where the sisters are just intoxicated by the presence of this gentleman. He's had programmability with the sisters over 20 times, so he has earned the Pell rank. That's programmability, and Sig was not having it for 1 second. She said, no flippin' way. And the sister said, way. It's going to happen. So eventually they said, well, our sister who is in her fertile state suspected you would have an issue with this. She knows you, and she knows you well, and she will offer you a contest to decide this. And Sig says, okay, the contest is going to be, we're going to fight it out, which is very shocking to the sisters. The sisters are very powerful. The sisters aren't used to fighting anybody other than black hats on a set-piece battlefield using their minds. They're not used to putting their hands on anybody or having anybody put their hands on them. This is different for them. But they said, fine, okay, we're going to do this. And after we get done whipping your ass, you're going to not trouble Lord Blanchefort no more. And then Sig is like, well, after I've humiliated this sister, you're not going to come here with your programmability ever again. So that's where we currently are. That is where we are. So let's proceed immediately with this. Chapter 10, Come Home. Kylos and Sig were in the Seeker's gym working out. Kylos alternating between lifting weights and hitting the bag. Sig, body suited up, nimbly climbing the bars. They always tried to set aside time to work out together. I've got to hand it to you, Sig. You certainly know how to make an impression. Sig twirled around on the bars, her tiny body moving with the skill of a champion gymnast. You think so? I bet that in-heat sister never thought in a million years that she'd be getting into a fist fight with the Countess of Blanchefort when all of this started. I should say you're probably right. You sure you want to do this? Positive. You're fighting tomorrow night, right? On the full moons? Yep, that's right. I know it sounds a little strange, but the sisters do this all the time, Sig. I believe I recall Lord Smithson had to service a sister whilst on his wedding night to his countess. What? How could they? When a sister comes in fertility, they don't dally around. Time is of the essence, and as they carefully scout out who they want to do the deed, they aren't going to take no for an answer, though nobody ever says no. How could Lord Smithson's countess allow this seeding to take place? On her wedding night, of all things. Well, I'm certain she wasn't too happy about it, but what was she supposed to do? I suppose she probably didn't have your guts, and let's face it, there aren't too many ex-black hat countesses out there. A standard countess or lady can't fight back like you can. The sisters appeared rather nonchalant about this whole thing. They do it all the time. Well, call it what you will, but I'll not share Dad with anybody. He took a vow to be with me and me alone, and I'll be dead before I merrily send him off to bed someone else. Kylos pounded the bag. Listen, I want you to be careful. Yes, you've never fought anything like a sister before. I know how to fight, Kai. Also, it's going to be just me and her. No gifts, no powers, just the two of us. Do you realize how strong sisters are? Yes. And let's be frank, this won't be the first time I've fought a sister. This won't be on a battlefield all laid out and lines drawn. This is going to be you and her arm in arm. The sisters are strong as earth movers. Then I suppose I'll just have to make sure I don't get hit. Sig came down from the bars and sat down next to Kai. You remember the times we were in the gym together, rolling around, screaming, hitting? Kai laughed. Yeah, you gave me a pretty hard time. I gave you more than a hard time, if I recall correctly. Didn't think I could fight, did you? No. Proved you wrong, didn't I? Yeah. Kai sat down and looked at the mat. She sighed. Sig, I know you've got a lot on your mind, but I was wondering, something the matter, Kai? Kai shrugged for a moment, then, it's my husband. What about him? He wants me to come home. Again? Yes, but this time I think he really means it. Did he say why? Oh, something about wanting his wife. Something about starting our family. Sig smiled. What a horrible man to want his wife, to want to become a father. How could he? She stood up and hit the bag. It's not fair. Well, you can't blame him for missing you, can you? Don't you miss him? Of course I do. It's just, I'm not ready to come home. I was a failure as a peasant, and then I was a failure as a Marine. I couldn't stay out of trouble. I was always fighting. I was in hack more often than I was out of it. It wasn't until I got here that things changed. Dav gave me a chance. He believed in me. You've been a good friend and a great asset. It's him. It's all him. He helped me find myself, and elders helped me. I love this. I love being here. She slammed the bag. It's not fair. I'm not ready to go. I know how I'd feel if Dad was gone for a long time. I'd be a basket case. I couldn't be without him. I can't think. I can't sleep. Nothing tastes good in my mouth. I've even been seeing things. Can you believe that? Seeing things? Sig asked. Yeah, strange things. I've been getting these vaguely threatening messages in my Marine mail. They're probably from my rot-gutted commander, I don't know. And then I've been seeing these weird, peppy little messages written out all over the place. I saw one in the clouds the other day, and in the mountains, and in the toilet of all things, which was gross. What do the messages say? Tuesday morning poetry, stupid stuff like you'd see hanging on the wall in a locker room. I think one said, the darkest night begets the brightest dawn. What a bunch of crap, Sig thought a moment. The threatening messages, Kai, were they signed with an M? Yeah, how'd you know? I've also gotten a few odd messages signed M. Maybe they're connected. Kai ran a hand through her sweaty hair. I don't know, I'm pretty sure mine are from my commander. His key is encoded in the notes, and the guy hates me, so they must be from him. And they're not really bad, I guess, they're just worded in a way that feels a little creepy. Maybe I just need some sleep. Me, needing sleep, imagine that. Sig stood and held the bag. Kai pounded it. You need to relax, Kai. I know. Why don't you and I hit the bowling alley and then throw it around a little bit? Kai managed to laugh. You know, I'm really not much into bowling, Sig, and the last time we went to the alley, you tried to get everyone to bowl naked. I got to tell you, that really freaked me out. You try bowling in a gown. You know what I would like? Coming here as often as I do, I've become a big supporter of the Sarfortnum College Brantball team, the old Magenta 40s. There's a match tonight with the St. Edmunds Tarpoons and the Fern Industrial Precision teams visiting. We could all go and sit in the Blanchefort box right down the center line and watch. I'd really like that. Sig gave Kai a rap on the shoulder. Sure, Kai, sure, we can do that. I'll have my staff tell the school to expect us this evening and have the box stocked with plenty of sweet meats and good ale. Make sure the ale's from the Drunken Eel, and don't forget those crunchy chips that I like from Sandy's. Fine. Whatever you want, Kai. You know, I just had a thought about your situation. Why doesn't your husband come here? Not a chance. As you touched on, we have the college in the village. He could teach there. It's not a bad little school. I'm taking a few courses there myself. Dav sits on the board of governors, and he won't come. He loves that university in Tusk. And you love this ship, so something's got to give, right? Why doesn't Dav just give you a little more time off so you could go home more often? It won't work. So what's going to happen? Kai stopped and thought. I don't know. I don't want to lose my husband, and I don't want to leave the ship either. I love this, all of this. I love soaring the stars. I love the exploration, the danger. I love getting into fights. I love wearing my uniform. Can you picture me wearing anything but? Can you picture me in a dress and sandals? Not really, no. I don't think I've ever even seen your feet. Kai smiled. Well, that's a good thing. They're ugly. Sig put her arm around Kylos. I'm sorry your husband is putting you through this, but just think how he feels. His beautiful wife so far away. I know how I'd feel. You know, you'd be greatly missed here, but if it's any consideration, you and your husband will be expected as a guest in our home often. If you were to leave, it won't be a goodbye, just so long. Come on, let's get the ball rolling for the box and tell Dav we're all attending a match tonight. You're all gonna have to help me out a little. I still don't understand all the rules of Brantball yet. Sig walked at Kai's side and wiped her nose as they left the gym. She was eager for the match. It might put her mind off things. Another one of those stupid messages she'd seen popped into her head. This one had appeared on the steamed-up mirror behind the bar at the Drunken Eel. It said, "Somebody you love out there loves you too." And with that, we conclude Part 1, Chapter 10, Come Home. So, Sig and Kai are talking about their various situations, about this fist fight Sig's about to get in with a sister, and Kai lamenting that her husband is forcefully asking her to come home. And again, she loves her life in the Stellar Marines. She loves being Dav's first officer. She likes the adventure, the freedom, the soaring the stars, the drawing her gun. She likes the whole thing. But as she touched on, she also loves her husband, even though they're having a long-distance marriage and she doesn't see him that often. She still is faithful to him and she loves him very much. They talk about Brantball, and that Brantball is a game that I invented, 10 or 15 years ago. I was watching the Olympics, the Winter Olympics, and I was watching curling of all things. And I was marveling that there is a men's curling team and a women's curling team. And curling is probably one of the most innocuous sports I've ever watched. It really doesn't seem to be any advantage one way or the other, gender-wise. I know in this past Olympics in Beijing, that there were like mixed curling teams, but at the time there wasn't when I wrote this. So I came up with Brant Ball. It's a game that men and women can play at the same time, and it doesn't have just 2 teams, it has 3 teams participating. It's basically, it's hard to describe. You have 3 teams in kind of a hockey rink shaped field. You have 3 houses, and that's where the various teams come from. And you have a ball, and usually the teams are mounted on something, either boats, like in a flooded field where they're on boats moving around, or you have little cars, a Brant Ball car that you move around in, and then you have also odd birds. This is a science fiction fantasy, so I was thinking of some sort of odd science fiction bird, like an ostrich, that they could ride around in. And the goal is to create a cinco. That's like a score. It's like a touchdown. The cinco. If you know Spanish, cinco means 5. So the goal is you get the ball and you have to pass it to your teammates 5 times without dropping it or getting it intercepted. And if you are able to do that, you score a cinco, which is 5 points. And then there's a lot of different roles. There's even fractions. Why would I want to do that and add like partial points? Like if you intercept the ball, you get 0.5 points, stuff like that. There's 5 positions, and I had a computer crash a few years ago, and the rules for Brant Ball were on that PC that crashed. PCs are such fleeting things. You got to make sure you have your data preserved properly, and I didn't in this case. So you have a charger who's like the quarterback. You have 2 wingers, 2 linesmen, and there's another one I can't remember. And your goal is to get the ball and pass it 5 times without getting it intercepted, and you get a cinco. And there's a lot of other rules that add or deduct points, and you have what's called a triangular event where you have 3 teams and you basically play 3 different matches, and you get to a certain number of points and the match is over. And since you have 3 teams, if one team has the ball, the other 2 teams usually can gang up on that one team. Or if one team is having a lot of success, the other 2 teams can form a brief alliance and then build their points back up. Pretty fun game. I even had the kids here on my street try it out, but they didn't quite understand the rules. But that's what they were talking about. That's Brant Ball. They mentioned these weird messages they've been seeing from M, which are worded in a rather creepy fashion. And then Kai says, I've been seeing these peppy little messages that are like meant to inspire you, and she didn't think too much of those either. But here we go. That chapter is done. Let's begin chapter 11, Carahil's Walk. So here's where we get to the big confrontation between Sig and this sister. Let's proceed right now. The following evening, Dab and Sig entered the courtyard deep within the Telmus Grove. It was twilight, and soon the grove would be plunged into tangled, leafy darkness. The 2 full moons, Illyria and Solon, soon to rise. The courtyard, so far, was empty beyond the 2 of them. This particular courtyard had lights surrounding the perimeter, but in the fading dark blue of dusk, the lights weren't doing much good. Sig was wearing her black bodysuit and light sandals. She had a thick shawl on to keep off the evening chill and keep her muscles limber, though she didn't really need it. Cold didn't bother her. Carahil bounded around the corner as if from nowhere. "My lord and countess, what a surprise," he said happily. He had something in his mouth, which he promptly tossed into the bushes. "Where's my gown, Carahil?" Sig cried, his whiskers drooping a little. "Don't think I didn't see you take it. I was hoping you'd follow me and avoid the sisters. No chance of that. So where's my gown?" "When you didn't follow, I chested it up and set it towards the far end of the grove. I was hoping to prank my mother into thinking that Countess Pardock had returned." "Well, unchest it and return it at once, and my damn knickers, too." "Aye, my countess. Before or after I've pranked my mother?" "Before. In fact, go get it right now, and you better not have made any teeth marks in the fabric, or I'll have you over my knee." "Don't be in any hurry to return, Carahil," Dav said. "Why?" "There's going to be a fight." "A fight? Who's fighting?" "I am. And a sister," she said, removing her shawl and giving it to Davidge. "We're fighting over Dav." "You're fighting over Lord Blanchefort? Are you planning on running off with the sister, my lord?" "No, he is not. And he's not going to be sleeping with one either." "A sister will not be an easy opponent," Carahil said. "Nor will the Countess of Blanchefort." His silver book appeared. He opened it and scratched in a few notes. "I should stay to ensure it doesn't get out of hand. This is not a duel, correct?" "Correct, Carahil," he said. "Nobody is to be hurt. I am here to monitor the situation. You may take your leave." He reached behind the wall and pulled out his box of sleeping kittens. He held it in his jaws. "I better get them out of here. Things could get a little chaotic." "Yes, you better," Sig said. She looked at the tiny forms huddled in the blanket inside the box and smiled. "You know, Carahil, you do have a good heart. Perhaps that's why I haven't utterly destroyed you over the pie incident. Go on, take them someplace safe." He bowed. "As you wish, my countess. Please fight well, and remember, keep her close and do not let her hit you." He took flight and was gone. She looked up at Davidge. He rubbed her shoulders. "Can I please have a kiss, love, for luck?" Davidge knelt down and kissed her, wondering what was about to happen here. He knew if she lost this fight and he had to see the sister, that Sig will never forgive him. And he knew if she somehow won, the sisters will never forgive him either. Anyway, he was in a bad spot. A few minutes later, several Marines entered the courtyard from the far end. A moment later, there was the sister, emerging from the dark. She appeared uncharacteristically angry, enraged even. Sisters were always so calm and collected. She strode forward across the courtyard, almost at a run, heading straight for Sig. She ripped her headdress off and threw it down, her platinum blonde hair all over the place. She pulled off her cloak and dropped it. She was nearly to Sig. Davidge backed away. The Countess stepped out of her sandals and jumped aside as the sister sent a hammer blow whistling her way. Moving easily in her black bodysuit, Sig nimbly avoided the blow. The sister swung again and again, grunting with the effort. Moving surely and smoothly, Sig evaded one blow, then another, and then another. She got behind the sister after another missed swing and punched her square in the side of the face. The sister tried to retaliate with a whooshing left. Sig ducked and punched her in the face again, snapping her head back. Her blows were small, stinging, annoying, and draining. The sister paused a moment. It appeared she had expected to have ended the fight with the first devastating blow. She appeared confused. She didn't expect the Countess to still be standing. Sig, taking advantage of the moment, punched her in the nose. The sister, stung and frustrated, tried to grab Sig, who easily sidestepped and put an elbow into the sister's mouth, drawing blood. The sister realized she couldn't move properly with all her robes on. The Countess was much better attired. She began pulling her robes off. Sig didn't wait. She popped her in the face and tackled her. Struggling in a heap, she hiked the sister's robe up over her face and wrapped them around her head. She could feel her massive strength. Sig located her head in the pile of cloth and locked on with her arms. She kept her body close, refusing to give the sister any leverage, any room to move. She tried locking the sister's legs with her feet, but that was a big mistake. The strength in the sister's legs was nearly enough to break her ankles. Freeing her arms, the sister swung with a right. Sig rolled away, but the sister caught her in the face. Though it was a glancing blow, Sig reacted as if she'd been struck with an iron bar. She flew a short distance away and landed with a fleshy plop. With a rip of cloth, the sister emerged from the tattered remains of her robes. She was small, about Sig's size, her skin a fertile bronze in color, and she was fit. Down to what looked like a white nightshirt, she threw herself at Sig. Sig was able to climb over her and latch onto her back, and there she pounded the sister in the base of the skull and kneed her in the kidney. They fell to the old stone cobbles and rolled about in a tangle of white and black. The sister just couldn't get a hold of the squirming, moving Sig no matter how hard she tried. She kept trying for the big blow, the haymaker, while Sig kept moving for leverage and peppering her with small shots that were starting to add up. It was obvious that the sister was no good at fighting like this, up close. Apparently the sisters, like the Black Hats, expected to fight at a distance, using their awesome array of gifts, and to fight hand-to-hand was an unheard-of indignity. Davidge had taught Sig how to fight in close. That, coupled with her knowledge of fighting in the Black Abbess's church, and her slithering expeditions through the castle's tunnels, had the added effect of making her very agile and able to move easily in confined areas. She now knew that she was more than capable of chopping down this mighty sister. All she needed was time. Grasping, reaching, the sister finally managed to grab Sig's left foot. She latched on and began twisting, trying to get Sig to cry out and submit. Twisting with the movement, Sig spun, trying to keep the sister from being able to apply pressure to her ankle. The sister became tired of this game, and she lifted Sig into the air and slammed her down, head first. The courtyard spun. Roughly, the sister dug her knee into the small of Sig's back and reared back to hit her. All it would take is one good blow, and Sig will be done. And then the sister will take her husband, her Dav, and have him for a night. Take him into her arms and love him. Just one night. 1,000 nights too many. Sig, drawing strength from within, slithered out from under the sister's knee, where it went roughly into the courtyard stones. As the sister winced in pain, Sig reared back and slammed her in the mouth, snapping her head back and drawing more blood. Knocked off balance, the sister staggered. Sig was all over her. She hit her again and again, and then climbed up onto her shoulders. She clamped onto her throat, choking, clinging, ankles locked. The sister tried to grab her, to pull her off, but couldn't reach. Soon the sister fell. She gasped for air. "Submit, sister," Sig yelled. "Submit, or I'll swear I'll choke you to death." The sister struggled feebly for another moment or two. Then, "I submit." Sig released her, and the sister wheezed for breath. Sweating, filthy, Sig allowed herself to relax. She could expect to be badly sore in the morning. The fight was over. She had won. Davidge ran to Sig and embraced her. "You all right, Sig?" "I am, love." Davidge looked over to the sister. "Sister, are you all right?" The sister sat there and didn't respond. "Do you require assistance?" Again, nothing. Davidge picked Sig up and threw her shawl on and began walking her out of the courtyard. The Marines approached the sister, but she waved them away. The sister sat there on the stone, dirty, knee-skinned, lip bleeding. She stared at the ground and then began weeping, slowly at first, and then growing to a sad, halting ululation. She put her face into her hands, her blonde hair in a tangle. Davidge stopped and looked at her. After a moment, he went to her and knelt down. "Come on, Dav," Sig said from a distance, a painful knot growing on her cheek. "Let's go." The sister continued to moan. Davidge sat next to her. She looked at him as he dried her tears with a cloth. He wiped the drying blood from her mouth. "Dav!" Sig called. "Sig, have a heart for a moment." "Why should I? This is the sister who wanted my husband. I won and she lost." "Sig, let me tell you who this sister is. Don't you recognize her? This is the sister who listened to me way back when I wanted to see you for the first time. This is the sister who had faith in me when all the others wanted you dead. This is the sister who allowed you to live the night you were mad with Shadowtech. Again, protecting you from the others. This is the sister who saved my life in Metatron." Sig slowly approached. The Marines parted for her. The sister looked up at her with a tear-streaked face, her skin bronze, a sure sign that she was fertile and ready for seeding. Sig sat down next to Davidge and looked at the sister. Her expression softened. "If that's the case, then I am in your debt, sister. Look around you. Look where I am today. Look where I came from. Look what I was. And it all is partially thanks to you. I am in your debt, and to pay this debt I would gladly give you anything and you wanted in return. Anything I had, except the love of my husband." The sister began weeping again. Sig's heart softened. "Here we are, sister, locked at an impasse, but maybe we can reach a compromise. If I have learned anything from being the Countess of Blanchefort, it's that compromise is always possible." The sister looked at her. "You wanted one night with my husband, and I will not allow that. You have experienced the lengths that I am willing to go to prevent that from happening. We fought fairly over the matter, and I beat you fairly. You wanted a night. Instead, I offer you a day. 1 day from sunup to sundown with my husband. And not as a sister. No headdress, no robes, no vithships, no marines. Just Dav and you, as a woman. You may walk with him, laugh with him, hold his hand. You may even kiss him on the cheek if you wish. Let him show you what it is like to be a woman. No sex, no seeding, just the simple joy of his companionship. Will you agree to that, sister?" The sister thought for a moment and spoke to Sig mentally. "You will trust me, that I will not take what I want?" "I trust you, and I trust my husband. That's what it means to love someone, to trust them implicitly. My husband appears to be fond of you for what you did for us, so I feel you are owed. What say you? Will you accept my offer?" "I will accept, but just the two of us. You will not be present." "Agreed." Davidge was puzzled by the furtive silence. "Sig, what's going on?" Sig smiled, and a tear rolled down her cheek. "Feel like going out on a date, Dav?" And with that, we conclude Chapter 11, Carahil's Walk. And we also conclude Part 1, The Sisters Program. Now, as I mentioned, there is a 12th chapter called A Day with Dav. And it is, as I said, completely extraneous material. Sig, in this chapter that we just read, had a conflict with the sister and defeated her in battle. I'm a big MMA fan. If you can't tell, I wrote this battle like an MMA fight. You know, lots of grappling, lots of in-close stuff. I love MMA. I always include it in my works when I can. Sig beats her. Sig is smaller, not as strong, but as MMA teaches us, if you have good technique, you can overcome a less technical, larger opponent, which Sig did. And this sister, going back to book 1, Sig was captured by the Seeker and was in the brig and was going to be executed by the sisters. And Captain Davidge said no, I do not want her executed. And the sisters are like, well, why not? We don't need your permission. We're just going to do it. And he said, well, I realize that, but I'm asking you to have faith in me. And this sister was in the group of sisters listening to him, and she was the only one who really sympathized with him, and she convinced the other sisters to let him proceed with this odd experiment to try to talk to a black hat or whatever. And she was always around on the Seeker, and there was a night where they wouldn't let Sig cast any of her shadow tech. She could not do any shadow tech at all, or they would kill her on the spot. So it built up in her body to the point where it was driving her mad. And she was tossing clothes about, ripping up her room. The sisters were like, well, she's insane. We're going to have to kill her. And David said, no, let me go in and talk to her. And this sister listened to him and agreed and allowed him to go in. David calmed her down, and eventually it worked out a compromise where they could go to a distant remote world and she could discharge her shadow tech and what have you. This sister had a fondness for Captain David. She knew his father. These sisters it's not hard to say how old they are, but she's fairly old, and she knew his father. His father, so the rumor has it about the League that his father had an affair with the Grand Abbess of Pithnar. Whether that happened or not, I really don't know. I really don't. I haven't really decided whether that happened or not. And if that was the case, then the Grand Abbess of Pithnar would be Davidge's mother. But that's just interesting speculation. But so she knew Davidge the whole of his life. She grew to admire him and what he had accomplished and his skills as a helmsman and as a ship's captain. She lamented to him in a brutally powerful mental exchange. She lamented her lot in life, that the sisters aren't allowed to enjoy the simple things that everyone else can. You can't just do what you want, can't go out and have lunch, and you can't enjoy the afternoon, and you can't fall in love. And the sisters are forced to control their emotions, forced to wear coarse clothing, eat gruel, and not fall in love. But they're still humans. They still have all the feelings everyone else does. And every so often a sister can't take it anymore and they fall. And they become a member of the Order of Lacerda. And they become hedonists in the extreme. We saw one in the Shadow Tech Goddess, who was like the main bad guy. And she was really tough. But this sister laments her lot and that she had come to like Captain Davidge. And then after the battle in Metatron, where he was hopelessly poisoned with Shadow Tech night poisons, it was this sister who cleaned all that Shadow Tech out of him and saved his life. And then she suddenly goes into her fertile period, years before it was supposed to happen, given her past association with Captain Davidge and her fondness of him. She wanted him to do it. And then, of course, there's Sig saying no. And then she dukes it out with Sig and loses. But then Sig feels pity, feels grateful for the things the sisters did in her early days of her capture and as she became the Countess of Blanchefort, and said, okay, well, you can't sleep with him, but you can have like a date with him. He can go out and you can just be a woman for a day, not be a sister. And that's what's chronicled in chapter 12, A Day with Dav. But it's totally extraneous stuff. We have concluded the case of the premature sister arc. There's no need for chapter 12. It's just yibbish, like my wife likes to say. In it, Davidge takes her around the village. They have fun. She laughs. They talk. They enjoy the afternoon. And then by the end of the day, Davidge gives her a little cryo tube filled with his seed and says, take this and do with it as you will. The next day, the sisters leave, and Davidge and Sig escort them down to their ship in the village, and Sig apologizes for everything. He says, I'm sorry, how I reacted. And the sisters are like, no. You had the guts to stand up to us, which is different, that's for sure. And you had the guts to back up your words with deeds. And they find that they newly admire Sig, the Countess of Blanchefort, and that they anticipate the arrival of their son, and they say, his programmability will be high, so they'll be back to have programmability with him, that's for sure. But no more with Captain Davidge, so that is done. And that concludes the case of the premature sister arc, again, a carryover from book 1. And again, if you're interested in reading that chapter, just let me know, and I can send you that chapter. It's okay, it's fine. But again, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't move the plot along. There's nothing in it that is really fruitful for the story. And that's important. You can't just go off on a tangent, which is what this was. But now we are done with part 1, the Sisters program. Now we get into part 2, the 11th daughter. And here's where a lot of these plot points, these plot beats, start to chug into motion. And the story really ramps up. And this is a long book. It's over 400 pages. We're barely into page 100. But now things are going to start clicking on all of the cylinders, as they say. So, next week, it will be part 2, the 11th daughter, chapter 1, The Shade Church. And if you remember, if you read or listened to the Cat book, my initial reading way back when, a couple years ago, The Shade Church is like the Black Hat's training facility on some woe-begotten world. But that's where we will be next chapter. Until then, this is Ren Presents. I am your host, Ren. Peace out.